Welcome back to the channel. I'm James.
I'm Serena.
And today we'll be talking about twin flames and the Kundalini awakenings.
Yes. Good job.
Thank you.
Welcome back, guys. Thank you so much for being here today. This is a request video that we got. Just asking us about Kundalini awakenings, and specifically the question was geared towards you, and if you had a Kundalini awakening.
Intro into the whole thing.
Yes, that's why James did the intro today. It's actually because I was feeling spiteful, so I made James do the intro.
You're gonna cut that, aren't you?
Yep.
Yeah, you bastard.
But yeah, so we're gonna talk about Kundalini awakenings. A Kundalini awakening is essentially like a spiritual awakening, but through the physical body, right? So you might have symptoms of energy rushes, you might have like blissful or euphoric states, you might have, headaches, tiredness, being up at weird hours, like almost kind of like manic depressive episodes would be like how I would describe it, because that's actually what I thought. So just going into a brief backstory, I had a Kundalini awakening at the age of 13 due to like a family trauma, and that kind of spurred like a spiritual awakening for me. And so like that's a lot of the stuff that I experienced, like headaches, energy rushes, definitely feeling kind of like manic depressive, like big ups and then big lows, but like fast, like the cycles would come on really fast. And then I would feel, blissful, and I would feel like, oh my God, I have all this creative energy. I want to write things. I want to play music. I want to do this. I want to do that. I'm going to start projects. I want to do all of this. And I would be up at like 3 a.m. in the middle of the night at 13 years old. Of course, obviously at 13, I didn't know that I was having like any kind of a spiritual awakening. I literally thought I was going crazy, which is what a lot of people that don't have a spiritual background think when they're going through a Kundalini awakening. So yeah, so that's essentially what we're talking about here today in this video. And so let's kind of, move forward in time in terms of like my life, but let's talk about when we first met.
So I mean, first of all, coming up to that point, I was quite nervous for you coming back, because that's why I didn't quite know what was going to be happening. I didn't know, like, were we going to hook up? Were we just going to be friends chatting? Were we just going to get to know each other? Was this going to be a person who comes to my life and teach me something? So I didn't really know what was going to happen. I had an idea of what I wanted to happen. Surprise. But for me, during that, I got very nervous before you got there. Once you got there, even at first, when we first started chatting again, there was a part of me that was, I don't want to say skeptical, but I still wasn't sure of what was happening. Obviously, as we got to talking with each other more, and we started to explore one another and get to know one another on a deeper level, there was a point, and I can't tell you when the point was, but there was a point of like me feeling awkward to being comfortable. And where that flip was, I am not sure. I really can't pinpoint it. I think it was somewhere between that first night and the second night when we went to sat on the rocks underneath the stars together. Somewhere between that point there was a little snap, and suddenly there was just ease.
Yeah.
I can't think of any other way to do that. So for me, during that time, there wasn't really like a spiritual awakening or a boost of energy. It was almost like a calmness, a serenity, a Serena to me. That's what I recall from that, was just the sudden calm, like, I can just be mellow myself, just who I am, as crazy as I want to be around you, and it would be all right. That was my experience from what I can recall from back then.
Yeah, it was like a sense of comfort, like a home almost.
Yeah,
I would pinpoint that moment because I also had the same thing. I remember when I first came back, like feeling really nervous, and then you were playing pool, I think, when I first got there, and so like it was in a scenario that I was really like unfamiliar with, and so I remember feeling very much like, okay, are we gonna have like alone time together? Are we gonna sit around with like other people? Like, I came back here literally for you. Are we gonna sit around with other people all night? And then I remember I actually went to bed early that night because we had been driving all day.
Yeah.
And so do you remember you had went off and you had other duties to do? And so I'm sitting there like waiting for this man to like come around again. It's like 20 minutes and I'm like, I'm exhausted. I don't even want to talk to him anymore. So I went to sleep. And then that next night, like you said, was the night that we sat on the rocks and talked and all of that kind of stuff. And I think what ended up happening was we both realized we could drop the masks in front of each other. Like we started
Yeah.
actually talking and having like real conversations, and we realized like, oh, we can actually be our true selves in front of each other and not have any of this like, oh, I'm James, oh, I'm Serena, like, you know, mask time kind of thing. And then that
Yeah.
allowed us to be more comfortable like within ourselves and within each other. Thinking about Kundalini, you know, and what I've experienced before in my life, because I do think I had a partial awakening when I was like 13, and then another partial awakening like later on in my life. So for me, it was less like Kundalini and it was more like a heart activation, you know, like, and for me also, it was like a big aha moment. Like it was like, oh my God, like I'm not moving in the right direction in my life. I need to make a decision. Do I want to stay with this other person that's, you know, maybe not treating me right, but I'd planned my life with them and I liked the way that life was going to look? Or do I want to be this with this person who I don't know? I don't know them. I don't know this country. You know, it's a whole other life adjustment. It would be like literally starting over from scratch again. And for me, I remember like being in Malawi on New Year's Eve and being like, just feeling like this ripple of energy through like not even just me but through my entire life. It was like my life was the chapters and someone just ripped a whole chunk of the book like in half, and I was like feeling that like pulsing and that energy of like the rip and the tear in my like entire life, and like seeing all the seams come undone, and I was like watching this in my own like vision. And for those days I was super out of my body. Like I'm not kidding when I say I crashed I crashed our vehicle that we were traveling in, and not like big crash but like I ran it into a brick wall because I was so like not in control of like my own faculties. And so like if you want to talk about Kundalini, that's also a symptom, is like, you know, being really out of your body or in like a really elevated state. And for me that was because I feel like I needed spirit to, I was so scared to leave this other aspect of my life that like I needed spirit to be driving the wheel, and you know, spirit crashed the car, but anyways.
It wasn't spirit that crashed the car. That was Serena.
But I needed spirit really to like take the wheel, and like really be there, because I was so scared and I was so out of my body that I needed that support. And so feeling ungrounded was for me part of that process. Now you're generally a very grounded person to begin with.
Yeah.
I would say maybe, I don't know the answer to this, but I would say maybe the most impactful thing that came from your end in terms of like spirituality is you telling your dad about me, and him being like, oh, maybe you found like your soulmate, or like, you know, your person or something like that, you know. So like yours, maybe your like awakening with that maybe had more to do with your interactions with others than maybe it did yourself to yourself, but I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, obviously, I spoke to my parents after I'd met you and told them about this incredibly beautiful, crazy nutcase that I had met in the trans guy from America, of all places. And obviously, I'd spoken to one of my other good friends, and as well, she was completely blown away just by the way that I sounded, not necessarily just by what I was saying. Obviously, it was that as well, but just the way I sounded. They could kind of tell that there was something different about this, because they had seen me through lots of ups and downs and around the corners and all the rest. So yeah, I think in some ways, yes, you are correct in that. I think for me, there was just something about it at that point where I had moved through so much in the few years before that, for call it about 3 years or so, and I'd done so much work on myself, and I'd really looked beyond where I was, and I was actually at that point doing something that was for me, and I didn't really give a shit about other people. I was like, this is actually me time. I want to go do something that I think is going to be really cool. It's a place I always wanted to go to, and now I could get paid to go do this crazy job where I get to spend all day in the ocean, which for me is, as you know, like my number one place to be. So yeah, I think it's not something that's easy for me to explain, that whole process of me going to the Transkei where I was working, to me meeting you, to that time period after you left, when you're potentially going to come back and you didn't, then you went back to the States, then you came back here.
Did you go through a dark night of the soul after I didn't come back? Like, because you were a little depressed for a while, I think.
I was. I mean, as well, I mean, when you were meant to originally come back, when I saw in the Transcar, when you're going to come kind of do like a volunteer program there too, so we could kind of explore one another. When I found out you weren't coming back, I don't know if the right word is depressed, but I wasn't happy. Yeah. I did the typical thing that I like to do, and I got my hopes up really, really high. And then when it didn't happen, I think for me, I didn't want to process it as much. So then I kind of went into a bit of a slump. And it took a couple days or so for me to kind of wiggle my way back up. But I think it was just that shock of suddenly, after organizing all these things and things kind of looking like they were 100% going to happen, and then for it to be like, nope. Yeah. It did hit me quite hard, and it was shocking. But at the same time, if that didn't happen, we might not be where we are right now. So that's an important thing as well. It's like with everything you go through, no matter how hard these ups and downs have been with each other, and the separation periods, and you coming or not coming, or me coming to you or not coming to you, and all of these different things, the fact that we're able to so persevere through all of that, we didn't hold it against one another. We were kind of like, you know what, this is just where we are at the moment. There was a very heaviness to it, but to get to the lighter side, to where we are now, you have to go through that, and you have to persevere through it.
No, I agree completely. And I definitely went through my own, dark night of the soul, which is really interesting because I think back to when I was in Malawi, we were swimming in a lake, and this lake is known to give you parasites. So everybody that swims in this lake, they just go get an anti-parasite medication, and then you're supposed to take it like 6 weeks after you swim there. And so I remember being back home at that point. So I had left and went back to the States, and I had lost the medication. So I had to actually go back to another pharmacy to get this like random anti-parasite medication. And this made me really sick for like 3 or 4 days. And I felt like the parasitic energy of my karmic relationship, my previous partner, like being like oozed and like pushed out of me. And I got like so sick because I could feel like it was like he was the parasite and he was the one that was like all inside of me. And it was like that was getting like pushed and squished out. And that came with like a lot of like side effects, like massive headaches and like, not feeling hungry for like a few days and just feeling really sick to my stomach and like all of these things. So yeah, I think honestly the Kundalini awakening and the dark night of the soul kind of go hand in hand. Yeah. Because you'll have this big kind of awakening or even this heart opening when you meet each other. And then what ends up happening after that is you kind of go, if you go into separation phase, you go down into the dumps, because then you have to heal all of these things that just came up, right? Like that was major rejection for you that came up when I didn't follow through. For me, I felt like the shittiest person in the world because I'm like, well, I just probably broke this sweetest person that I've ever met's heart, And then I didn't know if you were ever going to talk to me again, because there was a few days where you didn't talk to me, where I sent you messages saying, I'm sorry, like blah 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 blah, and then you sent me a message like I think it was 3 or 4 days where you were like, you didn't talk to me at all, and I'm like, wow, now we're never talking ever again. And then you finally sent me a message saying like, oh, sorry, like I just really needed to process everything and blah blah blah, and you were very kind about it, but I could tell there was so much anger still in there, there was still so much like anger and frustration and like disappointment.
I distracted myself with my work because I was just very busy at that time of the year.
Yeah, which was probably a good thing, to be honest, because it would have been really bad for you, I think, if you were sitting around doing nothing and then that had happened.
Yeah. I mean, I probably would have just been surfing a lot, to be honest, just to like distract myself, but yeah, it was hard. Yeah. But it was necessary.
Yeah, it was
necessary. And having gone through those things, I mean, if you look how strong we are together now, we wouldn't be as strong as we are together and be able to trust each other to the degree that we do now without having gone through the things we have gone through, and trust each other at the end of the day with it.
Well, I hope this video helped you. If you have any other questions, I know we kind of, took a detour on the Kundalini awakening and also talked about more shadow aspects. But if you have any other questions, please put them down below. I'll be happy to answer them. If you have questions for James, he doesn't usually do the typing. So if you guys are asking questions about James, I'm usually going, Serena. It's always me responding, but I'm going to talk to him and then I'm coming back and blah, blah, blah. So yes, so it's always me usually answering the questions. That may change one day because, who knows? He did the intro today, so who knows? knows? But thank you guys so much for being here today. We look forward to seeing you